Morgan Riley never imagined that her first board meeting at Pinnacle Investments would end with her spilling coffee all over the CEO's immaculate white shirt. But even less could she have imagined that same CEO would later offer her $20 million for one night. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what city you are from. And don't forget to rate this story. Your opinion is important to us. You can't be serious, Morgan breathed, her dark brown eyes widening in shock as she stared at Benjamin Hayes, seated behind an absurdly large mahogany desk. Benjamin leaned back in his leather chair, his confident smile never wavering. At 35, he exuded the easy self-assurance that comes with billions. I'm always serious when it comes to business proposals, Miss Riley, and this is, in essence, pure business. Morgan clutched the file folder tighter to her chest. The 28-year-old financial analyst had come a long way in a world where women had to prove their worth twice as hard. She'd gotten her MBA while waitressing, worked long nights, and fought for her job at Pinnacle. And now her boss was offering to buy her. This is harassment, she said sharply, standing up so quickly that her chair almost toppled over. I can report you. Benjamin's smile did not waver. Can you? My classmates and my uncle are on the council. And notice, I'm not forcing. I'm making an offer, a contract, for the night. Sexual favors? Morgan asked, her voice turning icy. In one night, he clarified, holding a folder across the table. 20 million. No strings attached. Never have to work again. Morgan's hand shook as she thought of her sick mother, of her crushing student debt, of the evacuation notice taped to her door this morning. Why me? She whispered. Something flashed in Benjamin's eyes. You were the only one who dared to contradict me at the meeting. You challenged my takeover strategy. And ... You were right. Morgan stared at the contract, her heart pounding. That money could change everything. Her mother could get treatment. Her sister could graduate from college. And she could just breathe. I'm not signing anything today, she said firmly. I'll show this to my lawyer. Benjamin raised an eyebrow, surprised but seemingly impressed. Of course, you have time. Until Friday. As she turned to leave, he added, and Miss Riley, this stays between us. No one will ever know. Morgan stepped out into the hallway and pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. What kind of desperate person would even think for a second to accept such an offer? The one whose mother is dying, and there is no way out, she answered herself. The phone vibrated. A message from the hospital. Mom's condition is getting worse. The doctor wants to discuss options. Paid options. Morgan looked at the closed office door. 20 million. In one night. Forgive me, Lord, she whispered, putting the contract in her bag. But she didn't know that at that moment, Benjamin was watching her through the security camera. And there was no triumphant glow in his eyes. There was something else. Almost like hope. 3 days later, Morgan sat in the lawyer's cramped office, watching Diana Chun read the contract for the 5th time. It's surprisingly legal, Diana sighed, adjusting her glasses. No loopholes, no tricks. 20 million straight into the account. After, she coughed, services are rendered. Morgan looked out the window at the rain pounding the glass. A gray silence hung over Chicago, exactly reflecting her inner state. And the confidentiality clause? She asked, reinforced concrete. Neither party has the right to disclose the details of the agreement. If you break it, you get your money back with interest. If he breaks it, he pays 50 million. Morgan raised an eyebrow. He apparently values his reputation very much. People like Benjamin Hayes always take care of her, Diana said, closing the folder. Morgan, as a friend, before as a lawyer. Are you sure you're ready? Morgan's phone lit up again. A message from the hospital. Her mother had been transferred to intensive care. I'm sure, Morgan whispered Dot later that day. She stood in Hayes Tower, riding the private elevator up to the penthouse. The reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman she barely recognized. An elegant black dress, perfectly coiffed hair, flawless makeup. Confident on the outside, but on the inside, her stomach was churning with tension. The elevator doors opened into a luxurious apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Benjamin stood there, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline, holding a glass of water. You've come, he said, turning around. Without his usual power suit, in a simple shirt and trousers, almost like an ordinary person. I brought the contract, Morgan replied, taking the papers out of her purse. Signed. Benjamin nodded, accepting the documents. Have you thought it all through? And you? Morgan retorted, surprising herself with her boldness. He froze for a moment, then suddenly laughed, sincerely, openly. This laugh changed his face. Fair enough. Will you have a drink? Water. Please, Dot, as he poured her a drink. Morgan noticed something strange on the coffee table spreadsheets, financial projections, and medical research. Working on Friday night? She asked. Benjamin followed her gaze and quickly gathered up the papers. Habit. He handed her the glass, their fingers brushing. At that moment, a shock passed through Morgan, so powerful that she almost dropped the glass. Double quotes. We. Can? She nodded hesitantly toward the hallway that presumably led to the bedroom. She just wanted to get this over with. Actually, Benjamin said, I was thinking maybe we could have dinner first. Morgan blinked, surprised. Dinner? I asked the cook to prepare something. If, of course, you don't mind. He suddenly hesitated. This is my first time. Dinner sounds good, Morgan said, confused by this turn of events. Over a gourmet dinner she could barely taste, Benjamin surprised her again. He asked questions. Real ones. About her job, her ideas for improving Pinnacle's investment strategy, her past. Not a word about the arrangement. Why did you actually offer me this deal? She asked, picking at her dessert, a chocolate souffle she couldn't swallow. Benjamin was silent for a long time. Would you believe me if I told you it's not about sex at all? Morgan almost choked. Then why all this? He stood up abruptly. Let's go. I'll show you something. He led her not to the bedroom, but to an office. One wall was covered with screens. On them were medical images, genetic profiles, research. Is this? Morgan was confused. That's why I need $20 million gone by Monday morning. Money that can't be traced back to me or my company. Morgan stared at him. I don't understand anything. This isn't money for you to sleep with me, Morgan, Benjamin said, his voice hard. This is money for you to do it. And tell everyone what you did, but not why. You're talking nonsense. He took a deep breath. I have 6 months left. I'm dying of Keller's disease. Morgan's eyes widened. It all became clear. The rare, aggressive form of cancer that had been in the news since the government cut funding for treatment. The papers on the table. His strange behavior. But why the performance? She whispered. Because there's Anne. Experimental treatment in Switzerland, he said, pulling up more files on the screen. My board of directors has banned it. The risk of failure is too high. The stock will collapse. I need to move the money, without them knowing. Morgan looked at him, and finally understanding lit up her face. And a sex scandal is the perfect cover, he finished. Everyone will think I paid you to keep quiet about the affair. No one will. Dig deeper. Morgan felt like the ground had fallen out from under her feet. So, you never really wanted this? Benjamin looked visibly embarrassed. No. You are beautiful. Of course, that is not up for discussion. But I would never force an employee to do something like that. It goes against everything I believe in." Morgan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So, I don't need to sleep with you?" "God, no," he said, clearly shaken. "You just have to let people think it happened." Morgan shook her head in amazement. It all seemed absurd and theatrical. There had to be an easier way. "If you come up with something, I'm all ears," Benjamin replied with a grin. "The board of directors checks every penny. The family keeps track of all the accounts. It's the only way out I could find." She looked at the medical images on the wall. The cold, calculating CEO was no longer standing before her. This was a man, tired, trapped, and desperate for help. "I need money for my mother," she said, almost in a whisper. "She has multiple sclerosis. Her insurance won't cover her treatment." Anymore. Something changed in Benjamin's face. "I know." Morgan looked at him in surprise. "Did you know?" "I'm studying the file, Miss Riley," he said softly. "I needed someone who would have a compelling reason to accept such an unusual offer. Someone with principles, who would keep his promise." Morgan didn't know whether to feel used or saved. So what now? Benjamin turned to the computer and began typing something on the keyboard. "Now I transfer $20 million to your account. You return home. On Monday, my assistant accidentally leaks the details of our agreement. You neither confirm nor deny anything. The money saves your mother. I get treatment. Everyone wins. Besides your reputation," Morgan noted. He shrugged a small price to pay for a chance to stay alive. As Morgan watched him finish the translation, a strange feeling came over her. For the first time since entering his office, she saw neither a billionaire nor a possible manipulator, but a man simply fighting for his life, the best way he knew how. "Thank you," she said simply. Benjamin looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes. "I think that's my line." Once Morgan had gathered her things, he walked her to the elevator. There was an awkward silence. "Until Monday, then?" she asked. Stepping into the cabin, "Morgan," he called at the last moment, and she held the door. "Yes?" He looked at her with a slight, almost sad smile. "You know, in another life, I would invite you to dinner." No contracts. The elevator doors closed, leaving her with a surprised expression and a jumble of thoughts against the backdrop of 50 floors down and $20 million in her account. All for a night that never happened. And for a man she was beginning to see differently. Monday came like a hurricane. When Morgan walked into the Pinnacle lobby, every eye turned to her. Conversation stopped when she entered. "Crisis meeting in 10 minutes, her assistant Ryan whispered, appearing next to her with a coffee in his hand. "And by the way, your mom's doctor called." "Treatment has already begun." Morgan nodded. At least that was some good news. The hospital had been surprised when she'd paid for the entire course up front, but hadn't asked any questions. "How bad is?" she asked as the elevator rose. Ryan winced. "TMZ is in the parking lot, and #DARR Hayes Pays is trending." Benjamin's assistant overdid it. The leak turned into a storm. The story looked like Morgan had been sleeping with her boss for years. To get a promotion. Not a night, but an affair. The elevator doors opened. Chaos. The PR teams are panicking. The board members are furious. And right in the middle, Benjamin Hayes, uncannily calm for a man whose reputation was being destroyed on live television. Their eyes met across the room. Benjamin gave her a small nod before turning back to the angry board member, waving his hands in his face. "Morgan Riley." A voice came from the conference room, muffled and sharp as a gunshot. Harold Westfield, the chairman of the board, beckoned to her with a crooked finger. Inside, the rest of the council members sat at the table, their faces stony and their gazes cold. "Miss Riley," Harold began, his face flushing with righteous anger, Are you going to explain these charges? Morgan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I think my personal life is exactly that. Personal. Not when it involves the CEO of a company and the potential theft of millions, one board member snapped. I haven't broken any corporate rules, Morgan said calmly, feverishly considering each answer. We don't have a ban on relationships with management. Relationships? Harold almost choked with indignation. The tabloids write about prostitution. Morgan's eyes flashed with anger. The tabloids are wrong. Benjamin and I have been dating for a long time. What adults do for each other is there. Own business. The door opened. Benjamin walked in. Everything about him said, this is a leader, despite the scandal that had erupted. That's enough, he said firmly. Miss Riley is right. Our relationship is our business. Relationships? Harold's face filled with rage. You transferred money to her. I helped pay for her mother's treatment, Benjamin said, his voice calm. It was a gift. Everything else is tabloid fiction. Morgan barely concealed her surprise. This hadn't been the plan. He should have stepped back, let the scandal die down, but he was protecting her. It's a coincidence, of course, that the amount of the gift exactly matches the cost of the experimental treatment in Switzerland? Another member of the council intervened. Treatment for which, by the way, we refuse to pay for your diagnosis. There was a dead silence. Morgan turned slowly to face Benjamin. His face had gone pale. Did you know? He asked quietly. Harold looked cold. We've known about your diagnosis for months now. And we also know how you're trying to circumvent the council's decision. He waved his hand between them. This is all just a clumsy attempt to launder the company's money. The money was mine, Benjamin objected. From my personal account, which is financed by the company's shares, Harold countered. The board no longer has confidence in your leadership. Effective immediately, you are suspended. An official investigation has been launched. Morgan froze in horror as security guards appeared at the door, waiting to escort Benjamin out of the building. This is madness, she cried. He is the best director in the history of the company. Harold turned to face her. And you are fired. Clear the work area by noon. When security led them to the offices, Morgan and Benjamin found themselves alone in the elevator, both in silence, as if they couldn't believe what was happening. I'm sorry, he finally said. It should have been different. You shouldn't have lost your job. Morgan looked at him. He was no longer the confident billionaire. He was a man, tired and broken. Is it true? She asked. About the diagnosis? Benjamin nodded. Without treatment, 6 months. With treatment, if you're lucky, 2 years. The elevator stopped at her floor. She got out, but he grabbed her hand. I'll fix everything, he promised. Your job, your reputation. Take care of yourself, Morgan said softly. Get this treatment. The doors closed between them, and at that moment she realized this is not the end of their story. This is only the beginning. 3 hours later, Morgan sat in her apartment, surrounded by boxes of office plants and family photos. Phone in hand, the news was already everywhere. Benjamin Hayes resigned as CEO, effective immediately. Pinnacles. Stock was plummeting. Morgan's phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Hello? It's me, Benjamin's voice said. Don't hang up. How did you get my number? She asked, although she wasn't particularly surprised. I remembered it from your personnel file. Listen, I'm at Chicago Memorial Hospital right now. I have a flight to Switzerland tonight, but first, I need to ask you something. Morgan hesitated for only a moment, then grabbed her bag. What floor? Half an hour later, she walked into the waiting room. Benjamin was pacing nervously near the window. He was wearing jeans and a casual sweater, looking more like a regular guy than a powerful CEO. Thank you for coming. There was genuine relief in his voice. What did you want to ask? Morgan crossed her arms, trying to ignore the way her heartbeat quickened. He ran his hand through his hair, ruffling his perfect style. "Come with me." "To Switzerland?" She blinked. "Yes." "As my assistant?" Seeing her distrustful look, he quickly added, "I'll pay you twice your salary at Pinnacle. And this isn't another scheme. I really need help. The treatment is going to be tough, and I need someone I can trust to handle my affairs while I recover." "Why me?" Morgan asked, repeating the question she'd asked that first night in his office. "You barely know me." "Because you are the only person who knows the truth and hasn't tried to use it against me. Because you stood up for me in the courtroom when you could have kept quiet. And also," he hesitated, "I would like to get to know you better. Without contracts, without scandals. Just for real." Morgan should have refused. It was madness, an impulsive act that could ruin her career. But instead she asked, "What time does the flight leave?" 6 hours later, Morgan boarded a private jet bound for Zurich. She wondered if she had gone mad. Benjamin, already asleep, looked younger, almost vulnerable. The phone VIBRATED.SMS from sister. "Mom is responding to treatment. Doctors are in." "SOCKPS, I saw you on TMZ. Seriously, sister?" Morgan smiled, despite everything. Whatever lay ahead, whoever Benjamin Hayes really was, at least there had been one good thing that had come out of their deal with the devil. The city lights disappeared under her wing, and she flew into the unknown with a man she barely knew, but began to feel much more than she should have. The Swiss Alps sparkled in the sun as Morgan looked out the window of the private clinic. It had been 2 weeks since their arrival at the exclusive medical facility, hidden among the mountains. The modern glass architecture blended perfectly with the breathtaking scenery. She glanced at her watch and picked up the tablet with Benjamin's schedule. The first treatment had started an hour ago. "Miss Riley?" Dr. Hoffman approached with a slight accent. "Mr. Hayes is asking for you." Morgan followed her down the spotless hallways to the treatment room. Benjamin sat in a chair, and 4 slowly injecting an experimental drug that might save his life. His face was pale, but he smiled weakly when he saw her. "How are you feeling?" Morgan tried to speak calmly. "It's like liquid fire running through your veins," he tried to joke. "But at least it's a beautiful view." He wasn't looking at the mountains. He was looking at her. Morgan checked the readings on her monitor, ignoring the strange twitch in her chest. Over the past 2 weeks, their relationship had entered a strange zone. Not boss and subordinate, not friends, and certainly not lovers. Something in between. "The calls are scheduled for this afternoon," she said, checking her clipboard. "I've rescheduled the board meeting for tomorrow. I hope you feel better." "Board of directors?" Benjamin snorted. "Did you know Harold is trying to kick me out for good?" "There's a vote next month." Morgan frowned. "He can't do that. You're the majority shareholder." "Only by a small margin," Benjamin admitted. "And with the stocks falling, some of my allies are getting nervous." "Then we need to give them something to believe in," Morgan said firmly. "I've been studying Pinnacle's financials. The Swiss development project you wanted to approve last quarter. The board was wrong to reject it. The projections speak for themselves." "Save your strength," Dr. Hoffman interrupted, appearing next to Benjamin. "The first treatment is the hardest. You need rest." As the doctor adjusted Benjamin's medication, Morgan noticed a slight tremor in his hand. Instinctively, she took it in her own. Benjamin's fingers tightened around hers, as if she were his last support. Later that evening, Morgan sat in the clinic's common area, working on her laptop. She'd spent hours gathering data to support Benjamin's vision for Pinnacle's research, hoping to help him maintain control of the company as he fought for his life. "Are you still awake?" Benjamin's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking exhausted but determined. "You need to rest," Morgan chided, making room on the sofa. "I've had enough rest," he said, sitting down carefully next to me. "What are you working so hard on?" Morgan hesitated, then turned the laptop screen toward him. "Protecting your leadership at Pinnacle. Facts, figures, projections. Everything the board needs to see to. Know your strategy was right all along." Benjamin stared at the screen, and at her, genuinely surprised. "You did all this?" Why? It was a good question, and one that Morgan herself couldn't quite answer. Why was she working nights for a man who was technically no longer her boss? A man who had indirectly deprived her of her career. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "You don't deserve to lose everything while you're fighting for your life." Benjamin was silent for a long time. "I've been alone for a long time, Morgan. Ever since my parents died when I was 16, I've built walls around myself. Company became my life. It was safer than letting people in." He looked into her eyes. "Until you spilled coffee on me at that meeting and didn't apologize." Morgan laughed. "I was horrified. You looked so angry." "I was impressed," Benjamin admitted. "No one had ever stood on my equal footing before." Their laughter dissolved into a comfortable silence. Outside the window, snow began to fall, covering the mountains with a fresh white blanket. "What are you going to do after this?" Benjamin finally asked. "After what?" Morgan asked again. The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Benjamin's prognosis remained uncertain. The treatment could work, or it could give him only a few months. "I haven't thought that far ahead yet," Morgan answered honestly. "You should," he said quietly. "You're incredibly smart, Morgan. Any company would be lucky to have you." "I've already taken too much from you," he said quietly. "You took nothing I didn't agree to give," Morgan said. "And you gave me my mother back. That's worth more than any job." Benjamin slowly reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. A simple touch sent a jolt of electricity through her. "It's a pity we met in this way," he whispered. "It's a pity I have so little time." Before Morgan could answer, Dr. Hoffman appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hayes, the test results are ready. Could you come with me to the office?" Benjamin stood up, the tension visible in every muscle. Morgan rose with him. "Do you want me to go with you?" she asked. He nodded, relief crossing his face. "Please." Dr. Hoffman's office was minimalist, clean lines and white surfaces. Like the calm before the storm. She gestured for them to sit down and took a seat at the table. "The treatment is working. Better than expected," Dr. Hoffman began without preamble. "The cancer cells are responding to the therapy. It's not a cure, but ... How much time is left?" Benjamin interrupts. Dr. Hoffman smiled. "If things continue as they are, years, not months. Possibly many years with maintenance therapy." Morgan felt tears welling up in her eyes as Benjamin sat motionless, processing the news he had just received. "There's one more thing," Dr. Hoffman continued. "With your response, you're an excellent candidate for Phase 2 treatment. A more aggressive course that could potentially eradicate the disease entirely." "What's the catch?" asked Benjamin, always a businessman. "You will have to stay in Switzerland for at least another 6 months. The side effects will be severe. You will need 24/7 support." Benjamin glanced at Morgan, a question in his eyes. Before she could decipher it, the phone rang, an early call from the board of directors. "I need to answer," he said, and left with Dr. Hoffman. Morgan wiped away tears she didn't even know she had. "He's very lucky," the doctor noted, "to have someone who cares so much." "I'm just his assistant," Morgan answered without thinking. Dr. Hoffman smiled understandingly. "In 30 years of practice, I know the difference between an assistant and a person who is in love." Morgan opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Was that it? This constant feeling, this urge to protect him, this ache at the thought of losing him? Before she could process the revelation, Benjamin returned, his face as dark as a thunderstorm. "The council is speeding up the vote," he announced. "Harold has convinced them that I am unfit to lead due to illness. The vote is next week." "Next week?" Morgan exclaimed. "But that's not enough time to save my company." "No," Benjamin said firmly. "I need to get back to Chicago immediately." "What about treatment?" Morgan objected. "It can wait," he replied. "But this, no." Dr. Hoffman shook her head. "Stopping treatment now means crossing out all progress. Then I'll die. Owning my company, not living without it." Benjamin snapped Dot as they argued. Morgan's mind raced. There had to be a way for Benjamin to keep both the company and his chance at life. "What if we don't have to choose?" she suddenly said. They both turned to face her. "The board wants you out because they think you're too sick to rule," Morgan explained, forming a plan as she went. "But what if we show them you're stronger than ever? What if we broadcast you live into the boardroom, healthy, focused, and with a revolutionary strategy for Pinnacle? And you get your treatment." Here, Benjamin caught the idea. A spark lit up his eyes. "Exactly. I studied your project in Switzerland. It's not just a good plan. It's revolutionary, if it's presented correctly, with you as the inspiration. The council won't dare remove me." "Morgan Riley," he said, "you may save my life more than once." As they planned strategy, something shifted. Between them, no longer just employer and reluctant employee, no longer just patient and reluctant caregiver, but partners in what felt like the future. That night, as snow fell outside, Benjamin and Morgan worked side by side, preparing a presentation that could save his company. When Benjamin, exhausted from his treatment, finally fell asleep on the couch, Morgan covered him with a blanket and gently brushed his hair from his forehead. "I'm not in love with him," she whispered to herself, although her heart said otherwise. "I can't be." But when he reached for her hand in his sleep, even in her unconscious state, Morgan realized that she was fighting a battle that she had already lost. The Pinnacle boardroom was buzzing with tension. The 12 board members sat around a huge table with Harold Westfield at the helm, a smug look on his face. Benjamin's portrait appeared on a huge screen, and the Swiss mountains could be seen through a window behind him. Morgan stood in the corner, formally representing Benjamin, but in the eyes of the council, she was just an outsider. She had been living on coffee and determination for the last 3 days, preparing for this moment. "Gentlemen, ladies," Benjamin's voice came through the speakers, strong and clear despite the thousands of miles of distance. "I understand that. You have called this emergency meeting to decide whether I am fit to lead." Harold began with false sympathy. "Benjamin, your health problems are responding much better to treatment than expected." But Benjamin interrupted. "Dr. Hoffman, please join me." A Swiss doctor appeared on the screen next to Benjamin and presented medical data showing the amazing improvement in Benjamin's condition. The council members exchanged tense glances. "That's all well and good," Harold said dismissively. "But your reckless financial decisions, especially your obsession with the Swiss project, indicate a decline in your judgment." Morgan felt her moment. She stepped forward and handed out a tablet. "To everyone, here is a full financial analysis of the Swiss project that Mr. Hayes proposed last quarter, and which the board rejected." The council members began leafing through the documents, their expressions of skepticism giving way to concentration. "If you turn to page 4, Morgan continued, "you'll see that, if Pinnacle had invested as Mr. Hayes suggested, the company would now have a 23% increase in its European market share. These are hypotheses." Harold chuckled, but not so confidently. "Actually," Benjamin countered, "while I was recovering, I personally invested in the pilot project." "Morgan, show me the results," he asked, She touched the tablet screen, and fresh numbers appeared on the screen in the room. Several council members gasped. 40% profit in just 3 weeks, one whispered. Impossible, exclaimed Harold. Very likely, Morgan replied calmly. And this is just the beginning. Mr. Hayes has developed a 3-year strategy that will make Pinnacle a leader in the sustainable investment industry. For the next hour, Benjamin and Morgan worked in tandem. He laid out the vision. She backed it up with numbers. By the end of the presentation, most of the board was leaning forward in interest. Everyone except Harold, whose face was getting redder. This is a farce, he finally exploded. You want us to believe that you developed this strategy while you were fighting cancer? And with the help of, he pointed contemptuously at Morgan, a junior analyst with whom you were caught paying. For sex? A deathly silence fell over the room. Morgan felt the blood rush to her face, but before she could respond, Benjamin's voice cut through the tension, cold as ice. Mr. Westfield, let me be clear. Miss Riley was never my mistress. She is a financial genius who saw the flaws in my original Swiss project and improved it beyond belief. Benjamin's gaze through the screen was so piercing that several of the council members shifted in their chairs. The transfer of money that caught your attention, he continued, was indeed for her mother's treatment. Treatment that saved her life. I helped because I could, and because Miss Riley is precisely the talent this company desperately needs. The very talent you failed to see in your own intrigues, Benjamin blurted out. Harold was choking with indignation. Your personal relationships are none of our business. Your case is that while I'm fighting for my life, you're secretly trying to take over the company, Benjamin interrupted. Why? Because you're secretly negotiating the sale of Pinnacle's assets to Global Financial. A murmur of joy ran through the hall. Morgan had a hard time hiding her surprise. This wasn't their plan. This is absurd, Harold stammered. Really? Benjamin raised an eyebrow. Can you explain the 3 meetings with the CEO of Global last month? Or the offshore account that the $10 million was transferred to the next day? Chaos broke out in the hall. 2 council members immediately distanced themselves from Harold, while others demanded an explanation. Morgan watched in amazement as Benjamin's calculated move destroyed Harold's support in seconds. When order was finally established, the senior council member, Thomas, cleared his throat. I think we've heard enough. I move that we postpone the vote on Mr. Hayes's leadership and instead launch an investigation into Mr. Westfield's actions. Several voices echo him. The board unanimously decided to retain Benjamin as CEO and place Harold on administrative leave pending an investigation. Morgan caught Benjamin's eye on the screen. He gave her a quiet smile, and her heart skipped a beat. Later, after the council had broken up and Harold had been escorted out of the building, Morgan sat alone in the empty boardroom on a video call with Benjamin. How did you know about Harold and Global Financial? She asked. I didn't know, he shrugged. It was a risky bet based on his recent actions and suspicious travels. Morgan laughed. You bluffed, and it worked. The best business strategies are a well-placed bluff. Benjamin smiled. I learned that from my father. The smile faded for a moment. Morgan, I can't tell you how grateful I am. You saved my company today. We saved her together, she corrected. The council is impressed by your vision, not my reports. They are impressed with us, Benjamin said quietly. As a team? The word hung in the air, filled with hope. When are you coming back to Chicago? Morgan changed the subject. Benjamin's expression turned serious. I don't plan to return for now. At least not for long. Dr. Hoffman wants to start the 2nd stage of treatment right away. Given today's success, the board has allowed me to manage remotely. Oh, Morgan tried to hide her disappointment. That's good news. Yes, he agreed. And also, I was thinking about your future. Morgan tensed. Was this goodbye? Now that he had company again, was she no longer needed? I'd like to offer you a permanent position, Benjamin continued. Chief Strategist of Pinnacle. You've more than earned. Morgan blinked in surprise. That's very generous. That's not generosity, he said. That's recognition of talent. You'll have to split your time between Chicago and Zurich for the next 6 months. And then, the words hinted at a future Morgan was afraid to even dream of. I accept, she said. But on one condition. I'm listening. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. No secrets, Morgan said firmly. No schemes, no contracts, no hidden agendas. If we work together, we'll do it honestly. Benjamin's expression softened. Agreed. Starting. From this moment, he took a deep breath. Morgan, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before you even accepted the job. Morgan's heart started beating faster. What was it? These last weeks with you, they changed me. You changed me. Benjamin's voice became hoarse, almost trembling. I know the circumstances that brought us together were far from ordinary. I understand that I have no right to ask for more than your professionalism, but I can't help but hope. At that moment, a nurse appeared from the depths of the corridor, interrupting them. Mr. Hayes, it's time for the procedure. Benjamin frowned at the interruption. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow, in person. Morgan frowned. Personally? But you're in Switzerland, and I'm booked on a night flight to Zurich. He smiled. If you want to come with me, of course. Morgan thought about her empty apartment in Chicago, about the job offer that could change her career, and about the man. On the screen, an enemy who had become something she hadn't yet decided to name. Then see you tomorrow, she said softly. The screen went black, and Morgan was left alone in the vast boardroom. Realizing that somehow the deal she should have considered her greatest shame had led her to what might be her greatest joy. The next evening, as the plane descended over Zurich, Morgan wondered what Benjamin had been planning to tell her before they were interrupted. More importantly, what she would say when it happened. Because somewhere between hating her and saving her company, Morgan Riley did what she swore she'd never do. She fell in love with Benjamin Hayes. Snow fell slowly from the sky as Morgan's taxi wound its way up the mountain road to the clinic. Lights flickered in the distance, the modern glass building glowing like a beacon against the dark silhouettes of the Alps. Morgan pressed her forehead to the cool glass, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Just 24 hours ago, she had been in a boardroom in Chicago, helping Benjamin save his company. Now she was in Switzerland, about to see him in person for the first time since their professional triumph, and near acclaim. The taxi stopped at the entrance to the clinic. Morgan paid and stepped out into the crisp mountain air, the snow immediately clinging to her dark hair. Miss Riley, the receptionist, greeted her warmly. Mr. Hayes asked to meet you in the solarium. He said you knew the way. Morgan did know. Her way around. Over the course of countless video calls over the past weeks, she had learned every corner of the clinic that Benjamin had shown her. The solarium was his favorite place. A glass garden where patients could enjoy nature, protected from the elements. Morgan paused as she approached the glass doors. Benjamin had his back turned, looking out at the snow-covered peaks. He was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, a look the Pinnacle Investments CEO didn't usually allow himself. His posture was straighter and his stance more energetic. Signs that the treatment was working. Taking a deep breath, Morgan pushed the door open. Benjamin turned around, and the smile that spread across his face made Morgan's heart skip a beat. Have you come? He said simply. Did you think I didn't? She smiled, stepping into the warm solarium. I wouldn't blame you if I hadn't come, he admitted. Our agreement was certainly not a normal one. Morgan laughed quietly. That's putting It mildly dot between them stood a small table set for dinner, with lit candles, and a bottle of sparkling cider alcohol was forbidden during Benjamin's treatment. I thought we should celebrate in earnest, he explained, pulling out a chair for her. Our victory over Harold, your new position, my encouraging prognosis. Over a gourmet dinner prepared by the clinic's chef, they talked easily about Pinnacle, about the health of Morgan's mother, about everything except what hung between them, unspoken but palpable. Finally, when they finished dessert, a sumptuous chocolate mousse that Benjamin had barely touched due to treatment restrictions, Morgan gathered her courage. Yesterday, before we were interrupted, she began, you wanted to say something. Benjamin put down his spoon, his face becoming serious. Yes, I did. He took a deep breath. Morgan, when I first proposed our deal, I saw you as a means to an end, someone who would help me get the treatment I needed. I didn't think of you as an individual, with your own dreams and problems. He stood up and walked over to the glass wall, overlooking the mountains. Over these weeks, watching you fight for my company with more passion than I've ever felt, seeing your genius, your integrity, your compassion, ... He turned to her. You've become the most important person in my life. Morgan rose slowly from her chair, her heart pounding. Benjamin, let me finish, he said softly. I know this all started with a contract, the most inappropriate, outrageous contract imaginable. I know I'm still technically your boss. I know there are 1,000 reasons why my feelings are complicated, problematic, and possibly reckless. He came closer so that she could see the golden sparkles in his brown eyes. But I am in love with you, Morgan Riley, completely, totally. If you don't feel the same, I'll understand. I'll respect your boundaries, support your career, and never mention it again. Not Morgan froze, stunned by his words. This man who had once seemed so cold and calculating was now looking at her with such vulnerability that it took her breath away. Say something, Benjamin whispered, even if it's goodbye. Morgan took a deep breath. When I was 17, my father abandoned our family, leaving my mother with multiple sclerosis, 2 daughters, and a mountain of debt. I vowed never to be so vulnerable again, to be independent, self-sufficient, to need no one. She came closer to him, and then you came along with your ridiculous contract and turned my life upside down. I hated you for it. Then I respected you. Then I started to like you. Morgan touched his face gently. And somewhere, along the way, while I was too busy fighting, I fell in love with you too. The smile that lit up Benjamin's face was like the dawn after the longest night. Slowly, giving her a chance to move away, he leaned down and kissed her. Unlike their business relationship, this kiss was sincere, gentle, with a question in every movement. And then when Morgan wrapped her arms around his neck, passionate, making her forget about everything except the feeling of him next to her. When they finally pulled away from each other, out of breath, Benjamin pressed his forehead to hers. So what now? Morgan asked quietly. Now, he replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, we will rewrite the contract. He led her to a small table in the corner where there was a single sheet of paper. Morgan took it and read the handwritten words. I, Benjamin Hayes, promise to love Morgan Riley honestly and completely for as long as she will allow. No conditions, no deadlines, no limits. Tears welled up in Morgan's eyes. This is the kind of contract I can sign, she whispered. You can write your terms here, Benjamin said, handing her a pen. Morgan thought for a moment, then wrote, I, Morgan Riley, promise to love Benjamin Hayes passionately and faithfully, to challenge him when he's wrong, to support him when he's right, and to never again let him face his challenges alone. She signed her name elegantly and handed the paper to Benjamin, who added his signature next to it. It's official, he smiled. Our most important agreement. And witnesses? Morgan teased. Benjamin laughed. I think we've had enough public attention to last us a lifetime. At that moment, Morgan's phone vibrated. A news alert. Hayes retains control of Pinnacle. New Chief Strategy Officer appointed. Speaking of public attention, Morgan said, showing him the message. How do we deal with that? The board, the company, the press. Everyone thinks our relationship started out as an arrangement. Benjamin thought, we will tell the truth, but not the whole truth. The world does not need to know about my illness or your mother's condition. But we will say that sometimes unusual circumstances bring people together in unexpected ways. And that sometimes what begins as a business agreement becomes the most important partnership in life. 6 months later, Morgan stood in the same tanning bed, watching Benjamin complete his final treatment. Dr. Hoffman kept an eye on the 4, pleased. That's it, she announced, removing the needle from Benjamin's arm. The last dose. The latest scans show no signs of the disease. Although regular checks are forthcoming, I am officially declaring remission. Morgan squeezed Benjamin's hand, tears of joy streaming down her face. Outside, spring had transformed the mountains. The snow had given way to bright greenery and wild flowers. Ready to go home? Morgan asked, looking at him strong and full of life. Home? Benjamin repeated thoughtfully. Chicago doesn't feel like home anymore. Morgan raised an eyebrow. What about the house then? He pulled her into his arms. Where you are. That evening, as he packed his things to return to Chicago, Benjamin seemed unusually nervous. What happened? Morgan asked, packing the last sweater into her suitcase. Are you afraid to go back to the office? After all, the council is now completely on your side, and Pinnacle shares are at a record high. No, Benjamin replied, playing with something in his pocket. There's something I've been wanting to ask you about for a long time. Morgan's heart skipped a beat. Another contract negotiation? Benjamin smiled, but his eyes remained serious. The most important of all, he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a magnificent emerald ring, elegant and unconventional, like their relationship. Morgan Riley, he said, his voice even despite the emotion in his eyes. 6 months ago, we signed a contract promising to love each other for as long as possible. I want to make that promise legally binding. Will you marry me? Morgan looked at the man in front of her, the man who had been her enemy and her partner, and now the love of her life. Their journey here had been unusual, to say the least, a deal with the devil that somehow miraculously led to heaven. Yes, she said, lifting him to his feet and pulling him towards her. But I have one condition, laughed Benjamin, always inclined to bargain. Which one? She asked. So that we never forget where it all began, Morgan answered seriously. So that we remember that sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best if we have the courage to take a chance. As Benjamin slipped the ring onto her finger, Morgan thought about the strange path that had led her here. A desperate agreement, a scandal, a fight for the company and her life. And through it all, a love story that no one, least of all herself, could have predicted. Deal, Benjamin whispered against her lips, sealing their agreement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness they had never dreamed of. 5 years later, the Chicago skyline glimmered in the distance as Morgan Hayes stepped out onto the rooftop garden of the Hayes Foundation headquarters. It was a warm summer evening. The space had been transformed for the foundation's annual benefit ball, which raises money for rare disease research. Mommy, a child's voice rang out. 3-year-old Eliza, her dark curls bouncing merrily, ran toward her, and her father watched her. Morgan picked up her daughter and kissed her plump cheek. Isn't it time for you to sleep, baby? She insisted, on seeing you before her grandmother took her home, explained Benjamin, looking stunning in a tuxedo. He leaned over and kissed his wife. "You look amazing." Morgan smoothed her emerald dress, which matched her engagement ring. "Is my mother ready to leave?" "She's already waiting downstairs with service," Benjamin confirmed. "She asked me to tell you that she feels great and not to worry." Morgan smiled. Her mother's health had stabilized thanks to the experimental treatment they could afford. The first of many lives changed by a desperate bargain. After putting Eliza to bed with a story and a kiss, Morgan returned to the ball. She watched proudly as Benjamin walked onto the stage. "5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a disease that should have killed me," he began to the assembled donors and scientists. "Thanks to an experimental treatment and the love of an extraordinary woman who refused to let me give up, I am standing here today." His eyes met Morgan's in the room. The Hayes Foundation was born from that experience, from the understanding that no one should have to choose between financial ruin and the fight for life. In the first 5 years, we funded research that led to cures for 7 rare diseases and helped more than 3,000 families. Applause filled the rooftop garden. As Benjamin continued speaking, Morgan recalled the path that had led them here, the hostile council chamber, the contract that changed everything, the scandals and victories. Later, under the stars, they danced, and Benjamin held her tightly. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Morgan thought seriously. "About signing your crazy contract, about the scandal, about following you to Switzerland." Benjamin nodded. "None. Every step, even the most painful ones, brought us here." As the music played and the city lights shimmered, Morgan realized sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most unlikely of deals. Sometimes what seems like a pact with the devil turns out to be a life-changing blessing. And as Benjamin twirled her around the dance floor, Morgan was sure that their unusual beginning had led to the most perfect ending. But this is not the end. This is only the middle of a story that will unfold beautifully page after page throughout their lives.